Much like episode 28, episode 29 of the Geekdom101 podcast is one that I also thought was special and close to my heart. I was joined, it's part one of a two-part interview. I was joined by author, reviewer, musician, YouTuber, streamer David Stewart. Check him out over on YouTube at David Stewart. And we discussed modern Star Wars because he was one of the guys when Last Jedi came out that was really intelligent about criticizing it. He wasn't one of those guys that was just screaming into the void. He was actually breaking down actual logistical points as to the mistakes that the sequel trilogy made. And it was a great talk, because we talked about the mistakes that he feels they made, plus we actually talked about writing characters in other forms of fiction and what does and doesn't work. You know, David Stewart's written a number of novels. He sent me a couple to read too. And he's a very talented science fiction fantasy writer. And he loves like the lore stuff. Like he loves stuff like Final Fantasy and Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. So he typically writes fiction like that or like science fiction stuff. But I think all of you will enjoy it because it's a very mature and really intricate and interesting talk with David Stewart. And it's part one, originally aired back November 12th, 2019, episode 29. And welcome back to the Geekdom101 podcast. And joining me on this episode, please welcome, he's an author, he's a musician, he's a movie critic, he's a lot of things, YouTuber, I guess you can say. Please welcome, Hey folks, David Stewart here. What's up?
Hi, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you for joining me. I have wanted to get you on for a really long time to have like a long form discussion with you about what you seem to talk about a lot on your channel. And, you know, and a lot of it, you know, you talk about music and you review a lot of metal stuff and you talk about films a lot. And also you talk about life and sort of analyzing the human condition. But I want to talk about how I first found you or how I found your channel. And it's all because of Star Wars. So The Last Jedi came out in December of 2017. I'm walking out of that movie theater and I'm extremely angry. I am pissed. And I'm sitting here and I'm like pissed off because not just because the film was bad, in my opinion, because it had problems, but I was pissed off because I swear to you, every reviewer who I thought I trusted prior to seeing this film was gobbling in it all over Twitter. Oh my God, this movie is ambitious, it's bold. And I'm over here getting hyped up. I'm avoiding spoilers, but I'm like, okay, like, you know, I can't wait to see it. You know, Rian Johnson has made great movies in the past. You know, I like his older films and I like his writing on Breaking Bad from what I've seen. But I'm feeling so empty. So I'm like thinking I'm the only person on earth who feels this way. Then all of a sudden, a lot of other people start talking about this. Oh, wait, this movie sucks. I'm like, wait a minute, so I'm not the only one. Then I found your channel, and what made you stand out from everybody else is that when you broke down Last Jedi in your several videos about it, what you talked about was not, you didn't go down the road of politics or SJW or Disney, and you didn't attack Kathy Kennedy or any of these people. Now, a lot of channels did that. You didn't. You focused on the pure issues with the film, which is not just the narrative was piss poor. The character development was pretty bad throughout the entire film. There are wasted characters and wasted moments. They have taken legacy characters and crapped all over them. But one thing that you pointed out really well is that The Last Jedi is a self-hating movie. And so when Luke first threw the lightsaber back, I was like, all right, we'll go with it then. Let's see where it goes. And then I'm talking about the first time I saw it. Then every few minutes there's more and more shit, you know, let the past die. And I'm like, are they trying to tell me that I'm a fool for being a fan of this franchise? And you covered that in your videos, and I was like, this man David Stewart is the only person who's actually talking about this in an eloquent way where you're not coming off like an angry fanboy.
Yeah, and part of that is that I felt like my fanboyness was purged with the previous movie, and not just, I mean, there's layers too, but not just purged by the movie itself, but really the reaction to my opinions of the movie. You know, there's this contingent of fans that are just virulently loving of anything that comes out that has the word Star Wars on it,
right,
and aren't critical of it, and they they will attack you. I got like death threats and stuff for putting out a YouTube criticism of it. So that was a big eye opener to me. Definitely, I felt like Last Jedi was a hate letter, is what I called it.
Yep.
And I remember the moment that I knew that. First of all, when he threw the lightsaber behind him, there was like a couple people that were like, ha, ha, and in this dead, quiet theater. And I was like, was this an attempt at a comedy moment? Was this trying to be funny?
Right.
Because it really wasn't. And the same thing with that crank call. They had that crank call where
Cringy.
like
the Yo Mama jokes.
It's like first of all, how do you crank call an enemy ship? Like it's like, hold on, let's crank call the Yamato real quick before we do anything to it. You know?
Well, what made it really stupid?
Sayonara.
It's actually even dumber than just that. The fact that General Hux is like, we will take no surrenders, we will take no prisoners. Then why don't you just blow them up now? Why are you receiving a phone call? If you're not taking prisoners, if you've been ordered by the Supreme Leader to kill them, why are you taking phone calls? Shoot them. I don't think the Japanese were willing to take phone calls during Pearl Harbor. See what I'm saying? I hate to bring that up, but it's when
true.
The movie's even dumber the more times you've watched it. And I'm going to tell you something, David, man. I have gone back. I've watched that movie 7 times. And I know what you're thinking.
Gosh.
You're probably thinking I'm a sadomasochistic person. But I've tried to make sense of it, and I just can't. Because I have friends, good friends, smart people, believe it or not, who love this movie. And I just can't. I can't make sense of it in my brain as to why.
Yeah. Anyway, the moment that I knew that this was a hate letter was when he called the lightsaber
laser sword
because of some light sword.
Yeah. And
at that moment you knew, just like with the delivery, with the word not even referring to it by its formally understood name, that in the canon universe has been the name of it for at least 2,000 years.
Right.
I'm going to call it a light sword. Sword, the word sword may not have any meaning in like a 20,000-year-old galactic civilization. Anyway, because of some light sword.
Right.
A light sword is what it was originally called in the very first draft of the screenplay back in 1975.
Right. Yeah, with Star, was it before Star Killer? Anakin Star
Killer? No, there's a couple different drafts.
Mace
I can actually send you this one. But basically Luke Skywalker is an old man, and he has a light sword, and they call it a light sword, not a lightsaber. But lightsaber sounds better. You know, it just sounds better.
Oh, yeah.
So that's what it ended up being. But he calls it a light sword and ridicules her for thinking that the light sword is important. Now, I think people who are really forgiving of this movie were like, okay, this is like a Yoda thing. But Yoda doesn't ridicule Luke ever. He doesn't ever really ridicule Luke for,
and he doesn't really ridicule the Jedi either.
Yeah.
You know, until this movie.
Yeah, and then the entire position of the hero of the previous trilogy is that the Jedi were bad. You know, like what a turnaround of meaning. Not only were the Jedi bad, the Jedi need to go away forever, even though we have another like oppressive, horrible galactic force led by the Sith ready to destroy everything. It's like the Jedi still need to go away because one of these was my student.
Well,
that I thought about murdering.
Well, here's where things get really dumb. See, that people were telling me, like, the angry fans, like, oh man, Luke would never do that. And that's true. Like, Luke is the Redeemer. That's his role. He redeemed his father in the original trilogy. It's a beautiful story arc. It's very well done. I love it. But that's not even the worst part, if you ask me. If you peel away some more layers and we get even deeper into this, the problem I had was the fact that it's not so much that he was, he had a momentary lapse of judgment. He thought his nephew was a killer. Okay, fine. I'm sure that happens in many dysfunctional families. Great. I can buy that one. Where I have problems accepting this is the fact that he chose to go into exile purposely and disconnect himself from the Force, knowing that there is an evil warlock out there who has control of his extremely overpowered and ridiculously high potential nephew, with several of his students who are about to invade the galaxy and possibly put his sister and her ex-husband or whatever Han Solo was at risk and possibly murder millions of people. That's what really pissed me off, because it's one thing to say, okay, I have failed Ben Solo, he went to the dark side, fine, whatever, that happened to Anakin, great. It's the fact that he's willing to be such a coward. He is such a coward. He's the only one in the galaxy who has knowledge of the Force, who is alive, who can actually help in this serious space battle that's about to happen, and he's just gonna let his sister die. The same guy who in Empire was having these, upside down, holding up rock dreams about his sister possibly dying, and Han Solo
risked everything to do that. Risked everything to save his father. Yeah, and his indifference towards that thing, it just makes no sense. And again, this is the problem when you hand off a creative property from the person who created it to somebody else. They don't view the characters or the universe in the same way as the creator did, with the same love or even the same understanding of what the character is doing and what his motivation is. In a very real sense, Luke Skywalker's thoughts are the thoughts of George Lucas.
Right.
So, but even as a fan who, Luke from either just the movies or the EU stuff as well, to see a portrayal of Luke that is an inversion of what the original creator designed and showed through his movies is quite bizarre and insulting. And it was actually surreal when I saw it. When I went and saw the movie, it was a surreal experience. To where when I finished, I actually had like weird dreams that night that I was like, I watched some sort of bizarre alternate Star Wars dream it's like it was some alternate Star Wars nightmare. Like I had a nightmare and that was what the movie was.
Oh, dude.
Because it didn't make any sense. It was fractured. It was full of weird, powerful images that didn't really connect with anything. And it's kind of like waking up from a dream. It was like walking out of that movie. It's like, what did I see?
Well, you might make fun of me for this, but I actually felt sick to my stomach. Like, I remember feeling very sick to my stomach that night. And I'm not the kind of guy. I guess I was at the time a fanboy. I'm not even going to lie about it. I have self-awareness to say that, but I was just so grossed out because I realized it was over. Like, they can't bounce back from this. And now here we are, about a month away from the final story in this, saga supposedly, and I don't see how they're going to be able to rectify this because the damage has been done. And I just feel like, and people kept saying, you're just mad because Luke didn't swing around his lightsaber and be a badass. It's like, well, yeah, part of me wanted to see that, but that's not why I'm mad. I'm mad because Rian Johnson deconstructed this character, and I'm all for deconstructions if done correctly, but here's the problem, and this is something that I want to get into with you as a writer, because this is a much deeper topic here than just Star Wars. But when you're taking the property from a different person, like you said, you're picking up where somebody else left off, whether it be Game of Thrones or whatever you're picking up, right? I feel like there's a certain level of equity and understanding of that character. So Luke Skywalker had 40 years of equity since 1977. People grew up with this guy. And it's your responsibility as a writer to, at the very least, give the audience who grew up with him respect enough, right, that the character is at least in the same spirit of who he was. Or if you're going to develop him, go for it, but you have to be very careful. And I feel like what Rian Johnson was trying to do with this movie is he's trying to be cute, and that kind of stuff works with maybe his own stories, but he fucked up. To keep it blunt, he fucked up and fucked with the wrong legendary fictional character, and people came down on him for it. And what bothers me so much is they took the fucking, I don't mean to curse here, but they took the freaking low road, this company, by saying that it was all racist white men, when I'm a Hispanic male. I'm not racist towards anybody, and I would assume you're not either. And it's like they painted everybody who hated the movie as this sort of racist, misogynistic white man. It has nothing to do with the gender of the characters or any of that stuff. It's what you've done to this character and made him so unlikable. Even if it was George Lucas writing it, it would still be bad, but it's worse if it's somebody else.
Yeah. George Lucas wouldn't have come out with a movie that was
Never.
like this at all.
Never.
I don't think he would have.
Never.
If you have like some sort of negative opinion of the prequels and anything to do with that, I think at the very least you can look at the prequels and say they're very true to George's vision. This is not the case. Like, and again, it's not. So, you know, I watched Toy Story 4 the other night, and it's picked up by and done by people that none of the original creators are actually involved. Like, so there's a bunch of writers, none of them are the original writers, and it feels that way.
And it's the same thing with
like
Terminator Dark Fate, by the way. It's the same thing. Bunch of writers, none of them are James Cameron.
Yeah, it feels like none of the portrayals of the characters feel right. You know, they're done by writers who don't have the same love for the characters, don't understand the characters the way that like Joss Whedon did when he, you know, wrote Toy Story, the original one. And if you feel it that way, and in this case with Last Jedi, you feel it, but it's not just that. It's that Rian Johnson wanted to make people who liked Star Wars feel bad.
Yes,
it felt that it's way. Not just that he didn't understand the characters; he actively disliked them and disliked Star Wars. His entire thing was like, I'm going to do something totally original with Star Wars by making a movie about how much I hate Star Wars. How did this get released? I mean, like obviously they're going to release it because they have to recoup their money because it's a business. But I mean, how did you get so far to production? Apparently with someone like Kathleen Kennedy, who's willing to fire people and have movies reshot. She had a huge portion of Rogue One reshot.
Right. And
she's willing
Solo.
to do that, but somehow Last Jedi comes on the screen and she's like, "This is Star Wars." I'm like,
because he agreed with
insane.
her. Because he agreed with her personal politics. That's the only thing that makes sense to me.
I have no idea what it is. This is the other thing about, you know, Kathleen Kennedy has produced lots of good movies. You know,
classics.
If you go look at her movie list, people are like, "She's incompetent," and this and that. I'm like, I can't blame this on incompetence. Because the past says she's not incompetent when it comes to production.
It's that she's not a good leader when it comes to Star Wars. That's
it has to be something else, or just it's an intentional perversion of the franchise. It's the franchise as a vehicle for something else, and this happens. So this happens when you have a corporation, or anything that owns property which isn't attached to a human being. So human beings, you know, if I own a car, it's my car. If I give the car to someone else, it becomes their car. With a corporation, if the corporation owns a car, basically all ownership over it is transitory when it comes to people. So it's a company car. Maybe it gets taken away from you randomly and given to someone else. And if you crash it, it's not like you really take a hit, you know?
Right.
The company pays for the insurance. So it's like a company car. And people don't treat company cars the way they treat their own car. Like if you buy your own car, or like, you know, I live in Modesto, so, you know, it's classic cars everywhere, right? George Lucas is from this town. So if you want to know where like Graffiti Nights comes from, if you've been to Modesto, that's what it's like, you know, it's like that all the time.
Right.
People love their cars. People take super good care of their cars. And the idea that their car could be randomly taken away from them and painted purple with like, I don't know what else you'd paint on it that would be offensive. But that's kind of what
butterflies.
It's what you end up with these corporate products is that because the corporation, which is not a person, it's just a concept that's made real by government fiat. Because they own Star Wars, whoever is working on it, it's a transitory relationship. You don't have a permanent ownership over that movie. You don't have a permanent ownership over Star Wars. You can't direct it and make it go a certain direction. You know, if they could fire Kathleen Kennedy, someone else would come in and take Star Wars in a different direction. But none of them are George Lucas. So it's never going to have an artistic view to it. It's only going to be something that's viewed as a property that has to be, you know, you have to get money out of it. You have to make your money back. You have to get an ROI on it. And at the same time, nobody that goes through and works on it is working on it the same way an artist would work on something they really care about. No, it's a different relationship. Work for hire versus work for yourself.
And it's interesting because I remember you made a very controversial video, which I'm going to get to here in a second, about you basically said that, you know, everything that's not written by the original creators is fan fiction, essentially. It's non-canon or whatever you want to say. And people, I think, misunderstood what you were trying to say, because I think people felt like what you were trying to. I think people took what you said wrong. I think what they're thinking is that you were implying that the product has of lower value, and that's not necessarily the case, because there have been tons of tremendous Spider-Man stories that have been written by people not Stan Lee. I mean, great, brilliant stories. You know, Kraven's Last Hunt, one of the best Spider-Man stories ever, written years after Stan Lee had dropped Spider-Man. You know, it doesn't take away from the value of that story. It's just not from the original creator, and thus it sort of is fan fiction. They didn't create Spider-Man. They may have created his adversaries.
It's somebody else's interpretation of Spider-Man.
Yeah,
and that's a very accurate way to think. So, you know, I'm trying to think of some of the Spider-Man writers.
Like Todd McFarlane's a big one.
It's Todd McFarlane's version of Spider-Man, or it's his interpretation of Spider-Man, rather than it being thought of as something that is, well, Spider-Man is definitely like this because one of the many writers in a series of writers for an IP owned by a corporation decided that independently that's the way it is. That doesn't make any sense when you stop and think about it. Like, wait, Spider-Man, it'd be like a writer that comes on and decides Spider-Man's gay, right? So Spider-Man's gay, which means he's always been gay. It's like, no, well, in that writer's interpretation, he wanted to make him gay for that story. That doesn't make Spider-Man gay.
Right.
Like, you can't, because then that gives whoever happens to be publishing the current version of Spider-Man complete control over past, present, and future meanings of Spider-Man.
And you can't do that. You can't.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
It's literally impossible.
So if they made Spider-Man gay, Stan Lee's Spider-Man is not gay. Spider-Man from the 80s is not gay. Obviously he's not. You know.
Right, he was married.
He got married.
Yeah, right.
He didn't marry a beard, you know. So it's just it's thinking of it as a different category.
But I think it comes down to, is it a good story? Does it connect with people? Because like let's say, and this is going to be hypothetical, this would never happen. Let's say someday you retire and you say, you know what, Danny, you tell me you can write a sequel to any of my books. Let's say I do that, which I'm not going to do. Let's say I did it, right? And it's a good story that connects with people, and even you're happy with it, right? Then at the very least, it's like, okay, at least I please people. What Ryan Johnson had done, specifically him and other fictional writers have done, is they're basically putting their own sort of, I don't want to say bias, because that's not the right word, but their own, I don't want to say political either, but maybe those are the right words here. You're probably better with words than I am because you write all the time, but you know what I'm trying to say? Like, I feel like if it doesn't connect with people, I feel like the fact that Mark Hamill told Ryan Johnson, who, by the way, I know that he's the director and writer, but Mark Hamill has been Luke Skywalker for 40 freaking years. He needs to be listened to on this. And Mark Hamill told him, I don't agree with the direction of this character at all. And Ryan Johnson was like, shut the fuck up. Not literally, but like, no, this is my story. And to me, that's just so disrespectful. It's like, it's not like Ryan Johnson wasn't warned, you shouldn't do this. And he still did it, I feel like if I'm writing a sequel to one of your books and you tell me, yo, don't do this, and I still do it and the fans shit on me for it, that's my fault,
Yeah, well, I mean, going on the same direction. If the corporation owns the franchise and can decide what is and isn't canon, then they could also just strike a movie that they didn't like from canon.
Right.
They could they could have come out with The Last Jedi and called it, said, this isn't the real Episode 8. We've spent $200 million on it, so it's going to come out. But this is just Ryan Johnson's version of Star Wars in the far future, right? And just come out with it that way. And then probably people would have been like, well, that was really crappy, or I didn't like it. They wouldn't have this feeling that's like, they killed Luke Skywalker. They had Luke Skywalker commit suicide is actually what he does, right?
In a way, yeah.
That's kind of in a way.
Yeah.
So they have Luke Skywalker die in a really dumb way.
It was not a heroic sacrifice, if you ask me.
No. I mean, if he could do that, he could have done that at any time.
Well, not just that, but it gets even sillier. We see Ghost Yoda fire lightning from the heavens and cause a
and
fire.
blow up the Jedi.
So why doesn't he just blow up Kylo Ren and we're done? Or Snoke?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I know that Obi-Wan said, if you strike me down, I'll become more powerful than you possibly imagine, but I thought that was a figure of speech. Like, I'm going to become more powerful and then I'm going to inspire Luke Skywalker to defeat you, which is exactly what he did. But no, I didn't mean literally you have godlike powers to where you can call down lightning.
Well, to me, it was maybe more like, once you're one force, then you have more intercessionary powers. Meaning like you are more active in the way the force is working out in the universe, which is basically an increase in power.
Right. Yeah.
That's kind of how I thought about it.
But not like literally lightning and volcanoes or whatever the hell they have.
Yeah, become a god and strike you down to lightning. It's like, otherwise he would have just done that.
Yeah, it's like, it goes back to your point. It was basically his interpretation of things that he misunderstood. I mean, I'm not trying to sit here and say that I know more about Star Wars than Rian Johnson, because that would be egotistical of me to say, but I feel like enough people have come out and said something similar to where it's like, dude, you screwed up. And what pisses me off is he never once has acknowledged it. It's like, and neither has Disney. It's like, well, you know what? Enough people like the movie and made enough money that we're going to go ahead and move on with the story. But one thing that they have acknowledged is the fact they had no direction. And that to me is the real problem with this trilogy. There is no direction. Whatever
they don't know where they're going.
Yeah, whatever J.J. Abrams had planned with 7 was totally thrown out the window by Rian Johnson because Kathy Kennedy allowed him to. And now we're coming back with 9, and this guy J.J. has to make a movie that's going to please people who love and hate Last Jedi and somehow save the franchise and somehow tie into the previous 8 films. It's an impossible task. It really is. I've thought about this thoroughly for the past 2 years. It's really hard. Even some of the best ideas is hard.
It's kind of funny because I feel like the first half, particularly of Force Awakens, made so many amazing promises that got fans excited, and they haven't delivered. They didn't deliver on any of them. We had this. The way Force Awakens started, you had Kylo Ren like stopping this bolt in air, which was
awesome.
Cool.
Awesome.
And I saw it in 3D and I was kind of like poking out of my face. I'm like, well, that was really cool, and you had this interesting idea, which is like, what if a stormtrooper was like a human being rather than a faceless robot, essentially?
Right.
Because like part of the reason you have stormtroopers die in waves is that they're faceless, so you don't really have to think of them as people.
Yeah, but here we find out that they're recruiting children.
Yeah, I think it'd be they could have gone a very interesting path. Instead, you just get him added into he doesn't really serve a purpose,
Hell no.
It's a waste of Finn's character.
And not just that, but his arc ended in 8. What the hell is he going to do in this movie? His arc is done. He beat his former boss. He helped blow up the Snoke ship. What else is left for this guy? He got the girl.
Yeah, he got the oh god, that was dumb.
That was bad. It was bad.
I don't want to think about it. Anyway, yeah, so you get that kind of stuff. Halfway through Force Awakens, they shift to basically making a different movie. And you can see it if you watch it. Next time you watch it, or if anyone's listening, they watch it. So they have a really basic setup, which is that we have to find Luke Skywalker because Luke Skywalker can help us defeat this First Order menace. And we have to find out where he is, and we're going to find out where he is because he's left behind some portions of a map.
Yeah, which by the way was retconned into, I didn't really leave that behind, but somebody happens to have it. See, that just proves right there they had no direction, because you can tell, dude, tell that the original plan for Episode 8, and you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure this out. The original plan was that Luke didn't even know about any of this shit. He went away for a different reason, had nothing to do with...
He went on his own important pilgrimage to find answers. That's immediately what we thought.
Yeah, it was answers to why the Jedi kept failing.
But there's this point in the movie where, like, I don't know what happened. Like, the studio exerted pressure. I have remembered some material where basically the original plan, the original version of the screenplay had, Luke Skywalker mentoring Rey through the second half of the movie.
Right, which they ended up saving for 8. That didn't even happen in 8.
It didn't happen in 8. They threw it out the window, and so they threw it out the window, and instead they had this Death Star plot that just kind of appeared halfway through the movie,
and Han Solo
forced the characters to act. Yeah, so you have Han Solo. I mean, Han Solo probably would have wanted to go see Luke, but instead we're doing this whole thing of like blowing up another Death Star. the second half of the movie is very disconnected from the first half in tone, in plot, in characterization. It's really bizarre, and to me, it kind of tells me that they were writing the second half of the movie almost as they were shooting it. They had to change directions after production started, but they couldn't just reshoot the whole movie, so they just kind of pieced together an ending that kind of worked for what they were doing.
A lot of movies fall apart because of this, man.
And Rian Johnson said he wrote episode 8 before, like, without even seeing episode 7, if I remember right.
He did. And you know what's stupid about that is you have that scene where Rey and Poe meet, and yet there's the scene at the very end of Force Awakens where Poe's saying goodbye to her. Like, that's... But David, this is a multi-billion-dollar studio allowing little stuff like that to leak through, and not a single person said, "Hey guys, did you ever notice this?" No, they didn't have a continuity editor for this shit.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
it's weird.
The thing is, here's an interesting kind of thing to think about: is when they made Lord of the Rings, the original Lord of the Rings trilogy,
the movies or the books.
The movies.
Yeah.
The versus not the Hobbit movies. That's a whole different can of worms.
Peter Jackson, the good one.
They actually hired like Tolkien experts to make sure that the Elvish they were saying was pronounced right. To make sure all these details were right. Now they changed a bunch of them from the book, but like there were certain details that they hired people to make sure that they were correct. There were people hired onto the production that were, some fan that was an expert in how you speak Elvish, in Tolkien's world.
Right, super nerd, basically.
Yeah, some kind of super nerd for that. They could have done that, and the thing is that if they had screened that for fans like 2 months prior to release, they would have known right away everything that was wrong with it. But I think they may have a different idea of what fans are too. Because when I think of Star Wars fans, I don't think about, the 20 YouTubers who talked relentlessly for a year about how good your movie was. I think about the people who've been collecting your toys for 30 years.
Right.
That's what I think of. So I don't know. I don't know how all that stuff got through them. I don't know how the movie ended up going through 200 to almost it probably cost them $1 billion to do the entire movie when you think about marketing and things like that.
Yeah.
Or at least 500 million, let's say. I don't know how you spend $500 million on a thing and then have that come out.
Well, the main...
Hollywood amazes me every time with it.
No, every time. I have to call it Mick Hollywood because it's right now, and this is kind of the real topic here. We're starting off on Star Wars, but I wanted to kind of delve into more so picking your brain about this kind of stuff. Star Wars is just kind of the main... It's a good example because it's kind of how I got to know you. But, it's not the whole topic. They're just churning out movie after movie after movie. Like, the MCU, I felt like, for the most part, the movies were fine. There's only there's a couple bad ones, but most of them are pretty decent films, and they really resonate with a lot of people. They're like the modern version of what Star Wars was back in the day. People grew up with these movies. I didn't because I was already 24 when Iron Man came out, but I still went back and I liked most of them. And, they've been getting better, actually. But there's going to come a time where the conveyor belt will break and you're going to have a bad movie. I mean, and I mean like a really bad movie. Like, obviously, Thor Dark World was pretty bad. There's a few bad ones, but...
okay, so it's been a long time since I saw Thor Dark World, but when I saw it, I didn't think it was very... And maybe I need to rewatch it or something. I don't remember how long it's been since
I couldn't stand it.
I liked it better than the first one.
Really?
I liked it better than the first Thor, yeah. But I don't really like Thor. And so I kind of talked about this when I talked about Thor 3, because like a lot of Thor fans really hated Thor 3, and I was just like,
I love Thor 3.
I don't really like the movie version of Thor. I don't really like him that much. It's not a character I like a whole lot. So for me, him being silly was fine.
Yeah,
didn't bug me.
No, and it was actually it was actual genuine comedy, not forced like Rian Johnson.
Yeah, but I could see fans being, not liking a lot of the elements of Thor 3. If you're a longtime reader of Thor comics, of course I read Thor comics back in the 80s and 90s, but I'm not like number one Thor fan. I've never really liked the Thor movies that much. I don't know. I kind of like Thor Dark World. Maybe I'll go watch it again and see.
No, I mean, maybe you would like it more.
I remember what happened in it. It had like those dark elves.
Yeah, and then like
I just like the fantasy elements. That might be it.
Natalie Portman had like a coma. It was just it wasn't very good in my opinion. But that being said, like Disney is churning out so many movies and a lot of them don't really have any heart. And I've been saying that for a long time, and people just don't listen because, unfortunately, most of my audience is fanboys, and I love all of you for being fanboys, but you got to also wake up a little bit here. Disney buying Fox, yeah, we're going to get the X-Men, whoop-de-doo. What's going to end up happening in like 10 years when this monopoly, or maybe even less than that, when this monopoly really gets bad? Because taking away Fox Studios eliminates a lot of really good independent films and really great stories that could have been told just to service that Disney conveyor belt of movies. You know, we're putting out 3 Avatar movies, 3 Star Wars movies, you know, 4 live action remakes every year, you know, Toy Story 5, 6, 7, and 8. You know, it's constantly a conveyor belt. And people eat them up, which they're not all bad movies. That's not what I'm saying, but they just don't feel like they have that much heart and soul in them, which is why when a movie comes along like, you know, like what's a good example? Like Joker. You know, Joker is another sort of retelling of a Joker story, but the movie had a lot of, like, you can tell they were going for something with that movie. It felt like they were going for something. You know, and I'm not saying every movie has to be an art house movie, but it's that McHollywood conveyor belt of
McHollywood. I like that.
You know what I mean? Like McDonald's.
Yeah, it's a corporate. Yeah, it's a corporate thing. Now I think the Disney Fox merger, maybe in 20 or 30 years, we'll go back and we'll realize the significance of that when it comes to what I call the corporate period of art. So whenever you're within an art period, you don't really have a name for it usually, because it's historians that contextualize all the things that were going on during those decades and decide what the name of the period is based on the styles there and whatever else. So like we have the classical period in music, which is the late 18th century, followed by the Romantic. I think we had the corporate art period in the latter half of the 20th century. And I think it was kind of typified by these big productions, things that cost a lot of money to make and were of an extreme production value. And I think the height of it was actually in the 80s. But I think we'll look at the merger as one of the final events that will possibly usher out the corporate period, because what's happening is that there's a lot of different alternatives to what made the corporate period so profitable and produced so many high production value movies and video games and things like that. So as you kind of condense it, you get less of the experimentation, which the corporate machine can then turn into the big production and produce something very profitable that lots of people see. It's all about, I'd say the corporate period is really all about everybody watching and listening to the same thing at the same time, you know, or within a very small amount of time frame. Not just the same song played by different performers, but literally the same recording, the same movie. You know, everybody who has a Blu-ray of, you know, Star Wars is seeing the same Star Wars. It's not a different play production of Star Wars. It's the same.
Right.
So I think we'll see that as pretty significant because it represents a loss of profitability. I mean, Fox probably wouldn't have been sold if it was highly profitable and the people running Fox, the executives looked in the future and saw that the corporate period, they were going to be able to continue to make a lot of money having these big production value movies. So it'd probably be better to exit before you go to unprofitability, sell to your competitor who possibly can continue that for them. It might be a boon for Disney to be able to continue to make that. And I know Disney actually probably thinks of the merger in a couple ways. And a big way is that they acquire intellectual properties, not just to make movies on them, but to enhance the value of their theme parks.
Absolutely. I was just there, man, a couple days ago. Hell yeah.
Yeah. I used to live in Southern California, so I had annual passes to Disneyland. And that was something that, you know, for a long time, they had the George Lucas stuff in Disneyland, and it was great. But I was just like, I can't believe they haven't just bought this out yet. They haven't bought this out yet. They could have saved money buying it out from George Lucas just to not have to pay millions of dollars in licensing fees to Lucasfilm every year. And that's a possibility.
No, for sure.
So I think we'll see that it's going to be some kind of turning point. I don't know into what. I would kind of say everything that's not corporate right now, I would call eclectic. It's just there's a high degree of variety in music. You know, you could spend all day listening to like Norwegian death metal,
right,
and not run out of stuff to listen to for like days on end.
or South Florida gangster rap. You could
That's
just
where
be
I'm
listening
from.
to that for several days and not run out of artists to listen to.
Well, I feel like nowadays we have YouTube and we have people producing different kinds of content. We have fan films now. We have, I think, because of the internet, because I grew up, I was a big time music fan for many, many years. Now I just listen to the same old shit because I'm just a grumpy old man. But for a long time, right, especially in like the rap scene, but also in the rock scene, and this as well, you had like the mainstream acts and you had the underground acts. You had the mainstream and the underground. And a lot of elitist fans, which I was one of at the time, was very much into the underground. I remember listening to Linkin Park before they became MTV Linkin Park, like when they were just like their EP. And and I feel like now with the internet, even though I have a lot of issues with the internet, it has sort of made it easier to get discovered. So if you're a musician or a filmmaker or anything, you can get discovered a lot. I mean, we've seen it. We've seen James Wan discover, like the guy who directed Shazam was a YouTuber 7 or 8 years ago. Now he's making big budget films for Warner Brothers, and that's a great story to tell. I think kind of the rise of the independent creator into working for this company, but also not selling himself out because the movie was his vision. So I think that the internet has made it easier, to be honest with you, with a lot of people.
It's made it easier. So it's made it easier for everybody to find their audience. And so this is the thing about corporate art, is that it's designed to have a big audience, to affect and to be interesting to lots of people. So when you have a big blockbuster movie, it's not a movie that's just for me. It's for everybody. And I think that's actually kind of one of the problems with Star Wars, the newer Star Wars stuff, is that Star Wars used to be for everyone. And so when you get messages coming out that like Star Wars isn't for you anymore, white boy, it's like there was never a thing that like Star Wars is for white people. Where the hell did this come from?
I don't even know.
Males in general. It's a projection from some sort of psychic place with these people.
Well, yeah. I mean, I feel like the issue though is I think that they're so focused on just getting the next thing out that they're not sitting back and saying, how can we connect with certain people? And that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you about is, you being a writer. I want to talk about characters. I feel like, just using Star Wars as an example, we can use other franchises too. Like Ghostbusters, for example. I hate to bring that up, but the actresses that played in the 2016 Ghostbusters movies, if you see them in other films or in SNL and whatnot, they're not that bad. But in that particular film, they were absolutely atrocious. So that tells me it's bad directing, right?
Yeah.
And yet with Star Wars,
I felt really, let me insert something. I felt a real sense of pathos, of empathy watching them in that horrible movie. I felt so sorry for all the actors that were in Ghostbusters. I felt like they were really trying. And it was just so cringy to watch. It's like watching somebody have like chicken blood thrown on them in the middle of like the prom or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Go on with what you're saying.
No. I'm with you. That movie was just, and you also had, the guy who plays Thor, Chris Hemsworth, and he's a really funny guy. He's a really genuinely funny guy. Great comedic timing, but he was a clown in that movie. But still, he's talented. But I feel like, with Star Wars, for example, we'll use that. We're talking about it for a while. Characters like Han Solo, Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, Darth Vader, Obi-Wan Kenobi, the 5 main people from the first film, not including the droids, they became iconic after the first film. Now we have, with Force Awakens, we have Rey, Poe, Finn, Kylo Ren. Then we have Snoke, Hux, Phasma, BB-8, and like none of those characters are over. Like they're not anywhere close to being as popular. We live in an era right now where communication should be easier. You should be able to get people's faces out there easier now than you could in 1977. But yet they're not connecting with the audience. People don't care about Rey. They don't care. The only new character that people have cared about is Kylo Ren. And then when you read the spoilers about how he's treated in episode 9, if they're true, it's a freaking joke. So what do you think, in your opinion, is the difference between Luke, Han, and Leia and Rey, Finn, and Poe? Like, what's the main difference as a writer that you think that the old trilogy or the old characters, just in the first movie, had compared to Force Awakens?
I mean, there's so many. So if you start with the source, so the characters in the newer movies, to me, kind of act like facsimiles of the older characters.
Yeah, because Poe is like Han Solo. Yeah, I see where you're coming from.
Yeah, so they're kind of like, Poe's kind of like Han Solo. They're kind of facsimiles, but I felt like the creators didn't really understand the source of where the originals were generated from. So the originals actually fit into a couple of character archetypes that are very, very easy for people to grasp onto, have a set of expectations with, and attach themselves to. So Luke is what I call an everyman character.
Right.
An everyman character is a character that is at the outset of a story really average. And if a character is very average, very normal, usually an everyman character will be a character that's on the young side, but not a child, because we don't project ourselves into children very well. So a young adult. Right. And if we don't project, even old people don't project themselves well into other adults, other old people, because it's by then you're completely formed. So you have an everyman character. He's, he's maybe a little naive. He doesn't completely understand the world, but he's not stupid. He doesn't have an exceptional talent that presents itself right away, right? He's not an amazing, swordsman at the beginning of the movie. He's not an amazing droid engineer at the beginning of the movie, right? Like, if you look at the first Star Wars movie, Luke is not exceptional in any way. That's important.
He's a dreamer.
Everyman characters are not exceptional in every way because we identify with them and we see ourselves as being a lot like them. Everything they do is very normal. It's very average. And that lets us really root for that character having success because we want to have success for ourselves. We kind of see that character as being very similar to us. And this can happen with males or females. The number of Harry Potter is another great everyman kind of character. There's lots of girl readers who really identify with Harry Potter, even the same gender as them. There's also girls who identify with Luke Skywalker, even though he's not the same gender.
Yeah, gender has nothing to do with it, man. There's a very small number of people who focus on that too much. It really
doesn't. I wrote a book called Water of Awakening. The main character's female. It's very popular with male readers. It's popular with female readers too. It doesn't matter. And the female readers can read the follow-up Needle Ash. The main character's male. They don't feel like they somehow are missing some connection because the lead happens to be male in the second book versus female in the first book. Anyway. So yeah, everybody can see that. Now, Han Solo is a character archetype that I call bad boy. A bad boy, and each of these have their own kind of trajectory that you lead them through with the story that lets the audience really see and be excited about what's going to happen with the character. So a bad boy is a little bit of a naughty criminal, right? But there's other elements to the bad boy that they really nailed with Solo. So Harrison Ford is very attractive. He is physically attractive, but he also has another level of charisma to him.
Yeah, he's a very unique specimen of an actor.
Yeah, so whether it's any kind of character, he brings a very kind of mature charisma and a charisma like he has a lot of experience, and he's a little bit dangerous. This is really attractive, particularly to women. Yeah. So bad boys tend to be they're interesting to men because men want to be the bad boy.
Men want to be them, women want to fuck them. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, men want to be them, women want to screw them. See, right? Like women are romantically excited by the bad boy, and men are excited by projecting themselves into the bad boy. So Han Solo is perfect. He nails it in every single way. They nail it with the introduction to him and his character growth, because what he has to do from a character's perspective is he has to grow from being a selfish, nihilistic bad boy into somebody who cares about something, cares about other people, has meaning in his life, purpose, and acquires virtue. And he does that through the trilogy. Does it first in the first movie. Remember, he was going to leave and go pay his money to Jabba. He turns around and saves Luke.
Right.
Because he cares about Luke and cares about the rebellion.
He shows he has a heart.
Something bigger than himself. And by the end of the Return of the Jedi, he's a general, right? He's fully ascended to like a paragon level where he is actually found meaning in his life. He actually matters, and he's actually virtuous. He's a highly virtuous character by the end of the third character, which is what you want. From the female's perspective, you want males who are dangerous and therefore represent
strength, power, but you also want the ability for them to be converted into protector-like males.
Women love guys who are bad boys but have that soft side they want to get out of them, and that's pretty much what you're saying.
They want the bad boy to work for them.
Yeah.
And so that's exactly what Han and Leia are. They have this huge friction.
Yep.
Leia is, she's a goody two-shoes, right? She's the classic goody two-shoes, which is a character that, the Harry Potter version would be Hermione, right? Usually it's a female, but it doesn't have to be at all. It can be a male. There's no gender for any of these. There's just, you tend to see the bad boy obviously be a male more often because it kind of plays into those sex roles a little bit more strongly. But
let me ask you a question. In Lord of the Rings, who would you say,
bad boy girl?
In your opinion, in Lord of the Rings, who would you say is like the bad boy and
you don't necessarily have one. I would say it's probably Merry is a bit of, because they steal mushrooms. Merry and Pippin are kind of bad boys.
Yeah, they're kind of they're rambunctious.
Kind of rambunctious, rebellious, but then they grow to be virtuous heroes by the end. That's why I actually don't like the movies skipping the real ending of the books where they go back to the Shire and have to do a battle with Saruman.
Right.
Because it shows that they grew from being basically children into being warriors, into being
they showed it powerful. a little bit during the big battle. But
it's not the same as the hobbits, them going back and becoming leaders of organizing the resistance.
Right.
I understand why they didn't do it for cinematic reasons. Doesn't fit into the way that we normally see a movie organized, but I kind of missed it. Anyway, so that's probably what I'd say. They kind of fit that bad boy type. So anyway, the three main characters in Star Wars fit these archetypes really solidly, and they grow the appropriate way. In fact, they're kind of case studies in how you actually manage each of these. A bad boy who's a rebellious guy turning into a virtuous character, an everyman who grows and discovers his power and becomes a paragon by the end, of virtue and of skill as well. Because we've taken that journey with him, and we've seen where he's gone, and he acts like a true virtuous person by the end of Return of the Jedi. There's never a point in Return of the Jedi where we feel like Luke is, still. I mean, Return of the Jedi is really about characters that have ascended to a paragon kind of level. They're very fully developed.
He's an alpha in that movie. Completely.
Yeah. So
I mean, and they even changed the way he dressed to symbolize that. It was very well done.
Yeah. The growth of a goody two shoes kind of character is usually toward being more, I don't want to say more Machiavellian, but that's the best way I can describe it. Just having a more down to earth view of the world, having a more human side, and less opaque with their emotions. And that's what Leia does. She becomes more humanized by the end of Return of the Jedi, for sure. And that's part of that is through her relationship with Han. So I think that's the main one. And I think one of the reasons prequels don't resonate as well is we don't have a strong sense of those kind of character archetypes. They're great characters, I think, in their own way, but they don't resonate in the same way because they're not based on this more pulp. They're not based on the pulp way that you approach characters.
No. And also I feel like with Anakin, for example, they had a hard time writing that character because there are times when, and I do feel like George Lucas had a hard time. I really do. I think he had an idea of where he wanted to go, but ultimately I think the execution was not that great because I think he's more of a visionary than an actual writer. I think as far as screenplays go, somebody like Larry Kasdan is probably better at writing the actual dialogue. The dialogue in episode 2 is horrible at some points. And I feel like with Hayden, he had a problem writing Anakin because you want him to be this virtuous good guy who becomes, an evil, manslaughtering, villain, but he wanted to make him a bit of a bad boy. But one thing about episode 2 that I noticed from rewatching it is that it is very disjointed as far as how Anakin's written, because he's like a lover boy, but it's almost like kind of forced. Like he's almost creepy in the first act of the film, the way he acts around Padme. She would never like this guy. He's too creepy, and they didn't have enough of like his bravery throughout the film. Like I think if you take what they did and you recut it, it could work as a better love story. He should have been brave, and through that bravery, she could have fallen for him as opposed to her falling for him before
he's not displaying the virtue that makes a character attractive.
He's
so that's just kind of missing.
For sure, for sure. And, with her, I think she is a lot like Leia in that she's brave and, she's also regal. But at the same time, as much as I like Natalie Portman, I don't think she had that much charisma in those films compared to other movies she's done, because she's been great in other movies. And then, with Obi-Wan, he's kind of the straight man. That's essentially his role. And I think the movie probably needed a more Han Solo type character to really make it work. Do you think, in your opinion, that with Poe Dameron, who's supposed to be the new Han Solo, do you think that the problem was casting? Because I feel like Oscar Isaac is an amazing actor. He's been in some tremendous movies, and he's a great actor, but he doesn't really have that Harrison Ford edge, and we really don't see him be edgy. He's taking orders from Leia most of the time. He's even cucking to Holdo a little bit. What, you know what I mean? Like, was that what was missing? Like, he's a good, Poe Dameron. The character of Poe Dameron comes out like a good guy. Han Solo's a scoundrel who happens to have a good heart. It just doesn't work.
It's because he's already working for the Resistance, right? He's already on the side of the good, and he's on no side, and so there's a lot of room to grow there. But he is kind of like a copy of Han, and it's like someone trying to copy the mannerisms of Han.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's just it. It's not that bad. Like it's always a missed opportunity is what I think about.
So let me ask you about Rey.
John Boyega in particular. John Boyega is a great actor.
Yeah,
but you can't. I should say it's very difficult to high quality act bad dialogue. You got to be on like ultra level to be able to do bad dialogue and make it convincing as an actor. It's
right.
It's hard to think of examples. I think Christopher Lee did pull it off, actually.
You mean as Dooku or just in anything?
As Dooku, as anything, really. Christopher Lee was like a rare talent in being able to be completely convincing with dialogue that was plain and boring.
Yeah,
even,
I mean, he was Dracula. But now with Rey, because I want to ask you about, because this is all having to do with like writing characters. That's what this whole podcast is about, is writing characters. With Rey, I feel like where they screwed up with her is they didn't give her an opportunity to be really, truly challenged. And I feel like people have tried to say, well, she's emotionally challenged, but she's trying to find her place in the universe and her parents and all that. But you also have to have a bit of a physical challenge, and every time that her and Kylo met, she would come out on top. In fact, she even kind of saved his life during the fight with the Praetorian Guards. Like, she is this, and it had nothing to do with gender. Rey could have been a man, I think, and it's the same problem in that and this goes back to what you said, actually, how the first time we see her in Force Awakens, and this, of course, has to do with the magic of John Williams. We see that music, and she's by herself, living in that AT-AT Walker, and she's eating that muffin, and we see her like struggling to live and living like a beggar or like a vagabond, essentially, right? And immediately you feel sympathy for her. But I don't feel like the movie really showed enough sympathy for her as they should have. And really they fucked up with Last Jedi more, I think, because with Force Awakens just introducing her, Last Jedi should have been the film where she gets put into a really dark place, like what happened to Luke. She ends up, Kylo should have kicked her ass in that movie. And she should have learned, okay, I'm not who I'm supposed to be yet. But we never got that, What else do you think was a problem with that character?
So, Rey, she's a Mary Sue.
Yeah.
And now the thing is, she doesn't start that way. This is a thing that happens. It's a progressive thing that ends up being added up to. So when we meet her, she's kind of an everyman, but just a little bit different, I guess, version of that.
She's self-sufficient, at least.
Yeah, she's self-sufficient. She's not like, that's not really everyman. Like, notice Luke is living with his aunt and uncle. They're not his parents, but he's living with his parents. And he wants something bigger. He's stuck at home, we kind of meet her and she's already self-sufficient on her own, but we don't, that's not a bad thing. We don't judge it negatively initially. But each obstacle that's presented, she just kind of pulls something out of her infinite kit behind her to deal with it.
Right.
This is the opposite of what you got with Luke. With Luke, you had a series of challenges he had no ability to overcome initially, right? So the first thing that happens is he gets like beat up by sand people,
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like the hero gets beat up by sand
The
people.
most
by dudes with
basic
sticks.
thing.
You know, it's this is like dying to the skeletons in like Greater Feydark when you first spawn in EverQuest. It's like, of course, you're dying to the level 1 skeletons.
Right.
So
Chocobos or that's a bad example.
yeah, or whatever it's you're dying to the rats in the first dungeon of Final Fantasy 12, right?
Right.
It's like I died of killing the water rats.
Or the skeletons in Ghouls and Ghosts. There you go.
Yeah, there you go. You die to the first. You run into the Goomba at the beginning of Mario.
There you go. We're using so many examples.
So he gets beat up by sand people, and then he just continues to get be checked the whole way through the movie. So then there's a dude who's like gonna try to shoot him in the bar, and Obi-Wan saves him by chopping his hand off.
Yep.
You know, there's one moment where he's able to like actually have some success where they shoot the TIE fighters in Millennium
But
Falcon.
even when he was escaping with Leia, he was like an accidental hero. Like she did a lot of the work too. She's like, oh yeah,
he's like, what's going on?
Yeah, you're right. And then when
things are happening,
then the trash compactor, you know, he's about to die again. You know.
Yeah. And R2 saves him. Darth Vader would have come and gotten him, but Obi-Wan stopped it. Obi-Wan got him free.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they got away, he piloted a ship. All his friends died, and he still didn't, you know, he had to have a ghost intervene on his behalf to teach him how to blow up the Death Star.
Not just that, but Han Solo helped.
And Han Solo had to save him, right?
Yeah.
So he had this constant thing of people saving him. And this is another reason why people like Harry Potter, because this is the same thing in Harry Potter. It's like Harry Potter is not good himself. He's not
not in the
powerful.
first book.
All his friends have to help him and save his ass constantly, or his teachers, or you know, it's never him. That's part of the everyman character. So with Rey, we get the inversion of that. Like, let me fly the Millennium Falcon through some amazing maneuvers. It's like, I don't know about you, man, but I've never hopped into a new car and been like, dude, I'm ready to go to the Indy 500 right now, man. Let's go.
Right.
I know how to drive this. Right. It'd be like hopping into a race car and knowing what to do with it, having never driven a car. Or she's never flown a ship. She's like, I've flown simulations. Like, well, shit, man, put me in the cockpit of that 747. I've done Microsoft Simulator. I played the shit out of that in the 90s. I can fly a plane.
Right.
It's like, no, nobody believed that. But she did that. And then, you know, there was she did some maneuvers that were beyond what anyone had done in the first movie. And it just went from there. And I think the moment where I really felt it cross over a line, that like I could forgive lots of things.
Yeah, and the first couple times you can forgive.
Yeah, the line that it crossed for me was when she did a Jedi mind trick.
Yep.
Having never seen what it is and been told about the Force hours before. She does a Jedi mind trick. This is different from Luke doing the Jedi mind trick in years after he saw it done. And years after he's been training,
and also
to be a Jedi.
Let's just clarify this real quick. Even if she's of special lineage, Luke was the son of Anakin Skywalker. So if anybody had special blood, it was Luke. And even
Luke. He would have been able to do it.
Exactly. So you can't sit there and say, "Well, Rey's special because she has a special dad and mom or grandfather or whatever the case is." It's not going to work anymore.
And I think the same thing there. Yeah, it doesn't work anymore. Great point. And in fact, that's kind of their point is they don't. I think a lot of them don't like this idea of some sort of special Force lineage, but that's part of I don't know. Anyway, in the meaning behind that in Return of the Jedi is that Luke has now ascended. You know, he is a Jedi.
Yes.
He introduces himself as a Jedi. He shows that he's a powerful Jedi. That's the point of that entire opening.
He's confident now.
You know, and there's even that's the point of what that. This communicates nothing. This is just to get Rey out of there so that she can coincidentally meet up with 3 other people who happen to be on the same planet as her. And then they're going to escape. And then you have a lightsaber battle. Where it was almost like, okay, you're riding as you go. You know, you're kind of riding by the seat of your pants. You're making it as you go. And you're like, okay, they have a lightsaber battle. And it's like, this is the first movie. What are we going to have happen? It's like, dude, we can't have this end. Let's have the Earth split asunder. And then we'll finish this later, you know. And that's kind of what happened. So she defends herself. There's a little bit of a lightsaber fight. And then another time, McLeod, you know, we split the Earth and we go our separate ways for a while.
Right.
So that's the problem is that we never see her struggle with anything ever. And we never see her ever communicate anything that
that a normal person has any kind of relationship to. You know, she's not living at home with her parents like were when they first watched Star Wars. She's not wishing for something greater. She wishes for nothing. She has no wishes. Her wishes were to sit on Jakku until her parents showed up.
Yeah.
You know,
and
versus
maybe...
Luke had this desire for high adventure. She has a desire for nothing.
Yeah, she was waiting for her parents supposed to go out and finding them, which, you know, that's fine. It's just that I agree with that. She should have sold more is the way I'm seeing it. All right, cats and kittens, that is the end of part 1 of our 2-part discussion interview with David Stewart. We're going to go into a lot more stuff in the next part. We're going to talk about other franchises. We're going to talk about writing too many characters in fiction. Is there such thing as making too many characters at once? Can it be done properly? Or, you know, do you run into problems? We're going to talk about, you know, the creative process. A little bit of anime talk, too, in the next one as well. And manga and stuff like that. Well, mostly anime, Vampire Hunter D and stuff like that. So we're going to get into that in part 2. I really hope you enjoyed this. David Stewart's one of the smartest guys I know and one of the most articulate people. So I want him to be a regular guest on this show because he's awesome. So anyways, again, Geekdom101.libsyn.com for all the updates on the podcast and new episodes when they drop. Remember to subscribe on Apple Podcasts and iTunes and Google Play. Thank you so much for your support. I love you all, and I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.